President, CEO, Campaign for Working Families out in Philly. You know what? If you're in the chat, all the people from Philly, please check in with us. All the people from Microsoft, I know you're out there because I saw you when Alfred posted this on LinkedIn. You guys did a great job supporting it. Alfred, what's going on? How are you, my friend?
Living the good life, man. I'm doing great, and great to be on here with you. And just to make some clarification, it's Ojuku.
Ojuku, you know, yes.
For those that don't know what that means, Ojuku means those who have power, that person which is power. It's a Nigerian name, so just want to make sure we pronounce it correctly.
So we got the right person on here because we're talking about empowering people. Right? So let's do it. Hey, so Alfred, if you can, just please share a little bit about your background with the audience.
Awesome, thank you. Alfred Ojuku, for those that don't know who I am, I've lived in a number of different places, but just to keep it short, I went to an HBCU, Lincoln University, Missouri. Very proud of what I've done there. I'm one of 7 in a large family. I also went to University of Missouri for Public Policy Administration, and now I work for a pretty small firm called Microsoft, and do a lot of work with diversity and inclusion within Microsoft. And currently, I'm a co-chair for the Blacks at Microsoft organization. I'm very involved in a lot of community work, a lot of small leadership work as well. I do some work with NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers, in the HISIG, in the Health and Information Sciences space as well. As a service specialist, I work with a lot of customers, healthcare customers, providing hardware solutions for hospitals and many of our providers in the Northeast. So I'm a man that wears many hats, but also excited to kind of share my experience in leadership and what we've done so far and what we're going to continue to do.
And what you continue to do is be a big supporter of all things National Urban League. I know when we checked in, I think this may have been the last time I saw you, the New York Urban League, you were doing a career fair that you pretty much kind of steered and helped us set up there at Microsoft, the offices in Times Square. I think we brought Men to Hearts out that day and did the Digital Career Success Series live from the Microsoft offices. That was amazing, but I know you led the charge to make that happen, so we appreciate you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, BAM and Microsoft, Blacks in Microsoft is affectionately known as BAM. BAM and New York Urban League have a strong relationship, and I'll say that because of the work that we do together, and it doesn't end. It's there all the time, so thank you.
Well, we appreciate that support, and we appreciate it from the National Urban League standpoint as well. Nakia Owens, we didn't forget about you. How's everything today?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderfully blessed. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, we appreciate you being here and all the work you do as President and CEO of Campaign for Working Families. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. So, I'm currently the president and CEO. Well, first, let me back up a little bit. I want to thank Brother Johnson for thinking of me and including me in this opportunity. I don't take for granted when somebody reaches out to you and says, hey, we'd like you to, be a part of this topic or an expert on this topic. So super, super grateful to him. So I just want to start in preference, kind of where my position in that regard. So currently President and CEO Campaign for Working Families, just a little bit of stroll in the park, just a little bit. I'm born and raised from California, and I grew up in the child welfare foster care system there. At 17, was emancipated from the foster care system and got a one-way ticket. I was blessed by love offering from the church and got a one-way ticket to Howard University in DC. I always tell people, and the rest is history, right? And so, along the line, I've had, the fortune of getting my undergrad and master's from Howard University, went on to get my PhD. Finished that in 2005, and along the way, and in various, places, living in Atlanta and Houston, Texas, and then here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, had the opportunity to work in a host of arenas, the human service arena, research arena, education arena, And so had a lot of great opportunities to be in leadership positions and use really my experience and, kind of the path and journey of life that it sends you down as, kind of a reference point in my ability to really exude a level of leadership that connects to the people that I have the fortune of supervising. So I'm super excited to be part of this conversation today. So thank you for having me.
Man, we're excited to have you. I'm looking in the chat. People are saying amazing story. Oh, people from Uniontown, PA, that's the home team. They're here in the chat as well. Look, people are saying amazing story. One of the things that keeps me connected to you is that story. I can't wait for the book. Nakia had came through when I was hosting the show in Philly, the Career Seeker Show on 106.5 FM out there. And she shared her story. If you want to check that out, that is available on YouTube, but it's an amazing story indeed. So we're excited to have you with us. Let's get into it. All right, so we're here today to talk about empathetic leadership. So that is a leader who creates a culture of trust and respect and can strike a balance between the needs of the organization and their staff to generate a sense of belonging and connection among their team members. Now, we've had a brief conversation about this topic in the run-through, and you guys were completely amazing in your definitions of what this kind of is to you. So, Alfred, if you don't mind, let's just check in and talk about it. Like, what do you view as empathetic leadership?
Thank you, Ken. And I'll kind of go backwards a little bit because leadership in itself, the word leadership, really has some level of root. And I'll tell a little bit of my story before we get into what I think empathetic leadership is. Growing up, I again, kind of give you kind of background. My father was Nigerian and very much a loud spoken individual. So we would go to the African meetings and the Nigerian, meetings, and he would be the one that would stand up and speak up and say the things they needed to say. And as a young child, I would think, well, why is he always speaking up? Why can't he just kind of quiet it down? How come his voice is so loud and so booming? And at that point, I didn't understand what that was, and I really kind of contrasted myself from what he did as a leader. He continued on to kind of lead the Nigerian community and get involved in a lot of different programs. And I think later on, what I realized is that there was a level of commanding respect that he built through that ability to kind of project and share his information, and that I later adopted. I tied that in with the idea that people want to feel like they have someone that they trust. People want to feel like they can, believe in someone and have a dream with someone. So empathetic leadership, from a leadership level, I also look at it as I have to be able to understand what the need of the people are. We have to be able to essentially connect with them at a level that is at the heart level, right? And not just the mind, but at the heart, because empathy talks about the idea that you are empathizing with the needs of the people that are looking for it. And, when I think about empathetic leadership, that's the first thing that comes to mind is how do I serve those people that are looking for that support? And I've seen that happen throughout my level of involvement in different leadership roles, from student government to community leadership to team leadership to now worldwide program leadership and community. So all those things sort of culminate in terms of who you are as an empathetic leader.
You know what? I was going to save this question for later, but let's just tap in now real quick. So I know that you characterize Microsoft as a small situation that you're involved in or whatever, but how many people globally are in BAM?
Yeah, great question. In terms of recognized, we have about 5,800 people in BAM. Now, that is just the people that are aware, and we continue to reach out to identify people. Again, we have chapters all over the world. We have chapters in Colombia, South Africa. We have chapters in Ireland, really kind of growing. And we work alongside with our partners, AmSoft, Africans at Microsoft, to build that network. And they even have a larger network. But it's about the awareness, and that leadership is where I try to make sure that people are recognized and at least aware that we matter as a community, as a Black community. And that's what I do. And that's what I look forward to being involved with.
Man, we appreciate your work. Ms. Owens, Dr. Owens, let's go. What's your definition for this topic?
Right, absolutely. So very similar really to, really what you've, read here. And I think that at the heart of it, and I know that we'll get into it because I really believe there are the 7 core tenets of what it really means to really be an empathetic leader, right? But I think at the heart of it, to lead, as Brother Alfred said, to lead, someone must want to follow you, right? Someone must want to be guided by you. Someone may want to have a need to follow you or to go, to be led by you. So I think at the heart of it is that you have to have followers. Let's just like set the stage right there, right? And then you get to the empathetic part where you're creating with those individuals that want to be guided and want to be led by you and that are following you, is that you're creating a culture that is with trust and with respect, with respect. And so it's the energy also that you bring to the table that creates that culture, right? But at the heart of it is your ability to have other individuals that want to be led and guided by you and that will follow you, right? And then you have those, which we'll get into it, those 7 core tenets that I believe that help to create the kind of culture and set the stage and the energy that you want to create in terms of leading your team or leading whatever it is that you're doing. But you have to, in order to lead something, if no one wants to follow you, you're not leading anything. So you need to, be able to be in a position where people want to be led by you and follow you.
Speaking of setting the stage, we have the best stage setter there is. Dory Brown and the Urban League Job Network team. They have the 7 tenets here for us to discuss. So next slide, please. All right, 7 core tenets of embodying empathetic leadership. I'm just going to throw a word out, and then we're going to discuss it as you see it being pertinent to this conversation. Authenticity. Alfred, I'm going to chime in with you.
I think it's being who you are every day, every time you step on stage, every time you have to lead someone. And sometimes it's especially when you're not. So authenticity for me, when I think about it from the 7 core tenets of embodying empathetic leadership, is really letting people know that you are no different than they are. You are learning from your experiences and you're teaching from your experiences. That authenticity means I am going to be able to reach out to you and say, hey, how are you doing today? How is your day going? Did you have something that you ran up against that you need help with? Or have a leadership meeting and say, hey, we failed. We didn't meet this number. We didn't, achieve our goal, but we can still move forward and keep going and work towards it for the next month or the next 2 months. So authenticity for me is being able to openly say, we are in this together. This is a journey that we're going after. And that means I need you to let me know when you're struggling or not struggling, and I'm going to do the same thing.
Got it. So Nakia, let's talk about this. So I'm thinking about kind of Alfred's role in working with professionals, right? And your title kind of gives I know you're president and CEO, but you're working with families. So your constituents probably cover the gamut as far as age is concerned. So let's just talk about how you kind of show up and lead in an authentic way.
Absolutely. I think part of it is, one, being genuine, your authentic self, right? I think the other part is a level of humility that I know that we'll speak about that, but it really feeds into that. When you're dealing with individuals that are twice your age, could be your grandparent, could be your parent. I think there's a level of vulnerability that comes with that, right? So you're your transparent self, you're genuine, you're authentic, but there has to be a level of vulnerability in that space if you're being authentic and you're working with different groups at different levels. For example, when I was leading an education project from the state, you're dealing with your state officials from, if it's, for me, it was the governor, the special initiative of the governor. You're dealing with the governor, you're dealing with the secretary, you're dealing with the superintendent, you're dealing with the principal, you're dealing with your staff on the ground, and then you're dealing with the student, right? So on every single level, really, you need to be able to be genuine, you need to be transparent, you need to have a level of vulnerability, in who you are. And an individual based on, who your authenticity shouldn't be like, oh, well, they're the president and CEO, you know. I mean, you should be able to, you know, be able to connect with them in a way that really speaks to the individual as well. You're on mute.
Alfred, I'm thinking about some of your work, and I'm looking at the next tenet, being trustworthy, and you're working with people kind of in their careers, and you know, often people have agendas, right? So how do you keep your credibility as being trustworthy in that setting?
It's the smile. We'll just start with the smile. I think I use the word authenticity, genuineness, and trustworthiness. I think when I show up, and I work out of the New York office in 11 Times Square, and if you ask anyone that works in the office with me, when I show up and they see me, we start with a smile. We start with a connection of who are you, what's going on in your life, and you know, where do we leave off, right? So Ken, when we connected again, it was checking in. Where do we leave off? And for me, that is the beginning of that trust that says, I know who you are, you know who I am, and we have a relationship that says, I am going to help you regardless of what's going on, right? And so part of that for me is, as a leader in this space, there's a lot of responsibility because people want answers. People want results. People want to feel like you can share with them what's important, what they need to hear. So in some ways, as a leader, you learn to balance the communication to the people that you know deserve that level of trust, and also ensure that the right people are getting the right information. There are some things that CEOs, CTOs, CIOs may not share about the organization, but if there's a level of trust with the right people, that information is essentially opened up and shared appropriately. You've got to manage your business. You've also got to manage your relationships with each of your employees, as well as each of your team members. So trustworthiness comes from knowing your audience, knowing your team members, knowing the people you work with, and knowing how to communicate to them effectively.
I love it. I love it. Nakia, you had spoke about humility, and it took me back to, I guess, our first conversation, right? And I remember you telling me all the things that you were involved in. And I kept saying, well, basically, people are calling 411 in Philly, but they didn't just call you. Like you were handling everything. It was amazing to me. And your humility and humbleness in that moment, you were like, well, it's the job, right? So let's speak to kind of how you operate consistently in that space.
Right. So I think like humility comes with being able to, if the bathroom needs clean, you can do that. And then you can also sit at the boardroom table, right? And so I think humility comes in a number of different forms. And so I think with, you know, the trust piece feeding kind of also into humility is that with your, when you have staff or when you're working and leading individuals, they want to be able to know that you're not expecting them probably to do something that they would be willing to do themselves, right? So that's another part, I think, of humility is, you know, being able to, what you're asking of your staff, what you're asking of your staff, is, you know, is the same thing that you're willing to put out and do. And one of the things I'll speak about also a level of, you know, humility or, you know, even trust, you know, being trustworthy or what have you. We're in the midst of hiring some staff, right? So we were interviewing a gentleman and, you know, we're always, when we're interviewing, you need to come package this, that, you know, like the whole nine, and we're grilling you, it's a panel interview. And then I said to the gentleman, I said, you know, we've asked all of these things. We've told you what we want. We've told you what we're looking for. We obviously selected you because we have certain, you know, qualifications that we want you to meet. But what is it that we can do to be of service to you as an organization that would help you to feel better about working for the organization? Or what are things based on the position that we can do to better serve you? What are you looking for? And so that going into it, we know that, well, if he's looking for a professional development opportunity, if he wants to get an X, Y, and Z certification or what have you, we can make provisions for that. So it's not just about a level of humility. It's not just about what, we want from you, right? It's a two-way relationship. It's what can we do for you as well. And that's kind of how I, kind of fuel and feed my staff across the board. I want X, Y, and Z from you, but I also want to hear from you, and I want to be able to serve you in a way that's beneficial for you. And that's part of that respect.
He must have knocked that interview out the park for the CEO and president to say, what can we do for you? That's the type of interview I want. I love it. I love it. So, Alfred, I want to speak about this. I'm going to jump to emotional intelligence, and I kind of want to key this up from a Black man perspective, right? I was at a conference that Black Enterprise hosts last fall, and a piece of it was about emotional intelligence in your career as you're leading, right? And people kind of historically have looked at Black men, and there's some dynamics that exist within that framework that question our emotional intelligence in a space, because we're, and this is for Black women too, we're kind of fighting to prove our worth out here. Tell me kind of how you're balancing and showing emotional intelligence just across the board and all the stuff you're doing as you go out and serve as co-chair of BAM.
Love it. Love. Great question. And it's great to hear sort of that I'm not the only one that is challenged with that scenario. I love this specific one, emotional intelligence. I'm going to relate it to, some of the new technology that, Microsoft is essentially working to push forward, artificial intelligence. And compare and contrast it. Artificial intelligence says that, I'm going to use this automated tool to essentially tell me what I need to know, information I need to know. And that's going to help me be able to do what I do better because I'm putting that data in. Emotional intelligence expects you to have that essentially built into your person and use that to understand what's going on around you and how people are feeling in a specific area or a specific situation. Yeah, for me, when I think about emotional intelligence, again, it's something that you develop internally because you start to pay attention to what's going around you, who's saying what, and really sort of, I would say, read the room, right? And as a Black man in the enterprise, we know that there are going to be multiple different people with different perspectives on what you can and can't do, what you can and can't control, what you are capable of doing one day versus the next. And the truth is, the one person that has control of that is you. And one thing I've learned in my day-to-day work is I can sit here and point and say, hey, I don't like the way you think about me. I don't, I think you should look at me a certain way because that is who I am. Or I can portray that experience and allow people to make that intelligent, assumption of who I am based on what I put out there. So emotional intelligence for me is a two-way street. It's what I put out there, and it's also what I pick up from the people around me in terms of connecting with them at a very, a very personal level. Like, who are you compared to who I am? And so that's what I love about emotional intelligence. It really is a self-tuned approach at understanding the people you work with and the challenges that they're going through. Now, I know, we may have lost them, but if I want to add a little bit more to that here. One of the things that I appreciate about emotional intelligence is that it comes with a story behind it. And the story is, I know that somebody's going through something because they've had certain experiences throughout their career, throughout their life. They're walking into the office. Maybe they're dealing with, having to drop their kid off in the morning at 8 o'clock. Maybe they're dealing with a loved one that's in bed and they're challenged, on a day-to-day basis. When they come in the office, that first thing, when I have a meeting with that team or that individual, some of those questions are going to come out. And so the questions I might ask is, how's your day going? What's going on with you? We might have a 5-minute, 10-minute chat just to check in, make sure that they're totally there. And that, in a sense, is that charged to prepare for that emotional intelligence and figure out, are there things that we need to be touching on that we haven't touched on? I'm actually pass it over to you, Nakia. I know you're on as well. If you want to add to that as well.
Absolutely. So I think the saying of first seek to understand and then be understood, right? I think that is part of a, significant piece as a leader in terms of emotional intelligence. The ability to understand where others are coming from first and before yourself, right? Putting self aside, being selfless, so that you can understand the position of others, being able to, people say walk a mile in somebody else's shoes before you decide to kind of cast, so to speak, the first stone. So I think that, emotional intelligence goes in many different angles, but I think first is really being able to be, know thyself, right? So I think you have to know thyself in order to first seek to understand, then be understood. I think you have to know thyself in order to understand that you may need to travel in someone else's shoes before, speaking on something, before yielding feedback. You may need to, walk away, in order to process what it is. And so all of those things fit into emotional intelligence. So when somebody's giving you, and I always say someone's giving you energy and maybe it's like not the right energy, bad energy, then you need to really like take a step back, because I always learned the other thing was that when you respond in with the same energy or worse that you're getting, kind of that's coming at you, you have given your power away at that point. Right. And so, you want to remain in the power position. And in order for you to remain in the power position, you need to act, emotionally intelligent. Right. So you need to first seek to understand, then be understood. And I just believe that that's a really, really important in order for us to have emotional intelligence. It's not always, and most of the time, it's not always acceptable, especially for a leader, to respond to somebody in the like manner, especially if it's negative. Now, if it's positive, that's great, but we're talking about like being emotional intelligent, and part of being emotional intelligent is being able to, really regulate those emotions in a way that's positive, productive, and that doesn't yield your power and give your power to others. And that's what's happening, like, with the road rage and this, that, and the other.
I have road rage though, so I don't know.
So you get like you're giving your power away to this person, and someone's like, "Oh, if I can get that, I can get, that so easily. What else can I get from this person?" Right? So I always look at it in that way.
I have an interesting story, and it actually ties into the compassion side too, but also in the emotional intelligence, where this is more of a work scenario. I won't give away too much detail, but there was a scenario where there was a deliverable that was supposed to be provided to a customer. Now, I'm working with a team of folks that are working on that content, making sure that was available for the customer, and for whatever reason, we were going to miss the deadline. Let's say that deadline is Friday at 5 p.m. The concern at that point were, what's the customer going to think about us? How are they going to see us as an individual? And it got interesting because the team began to sort of question, our efficacy, how